So there's things that we've always wanted to add to the game. Like, we've always wanted to expand the experiences that you can have on ships and the types of ships that might be possible in the game, to expand what it means to be a legend in the Sea of Thieves. We've got nothing to announce specifically yet. We're very excited about it, but it is very much that multi-year vision. We'll be talking about that in a bit more detail in the next Community Direct.
So the Community Direct finally went live after a 2-month delay, and naturally people were expecting something big. And I don't buy the whole expectations were too high argument either. That one always makes me laugh a bit. If it's a game you actually care about, why wouldn't your expectations be high? Low expectations usually means you've already checked out, whether you admit it or not. Anyway, slight tangent, the point is, expectations didn't just appear out of nowhere, the developers set them. There were plenty of mentions beforehand about exciting things being included in the Community Direct, enough to get people paying attention and, more importantly, waiting, especially with the delay hanging over it. People started assuming that meant a reset, or at least a proper look behind the curtain at what's been going on. So yeah, expectations were high, and people were ready for something meaningful. And to be fair, there were a few decent bits in there, little fragments that had some value, but none of it really lined up with what was being hinted at. It didn't feel like anything had been properly addressed, more like it was brushed past with a quick nod and a change of subject. And honestly, even setting aside the idea of some massive world-shaking reveal, I don't think people were asking for miracles. What most were hoping for was something a bit more grounded, clear communication, a proper explanation of what's actually been happening behind the scenes. What's changed? What's the direction now? Where is the team focusing its time? That's what a Community Direct is supposed to be, or at least that's the impression the name gives. This didn't really feel like that. If anything, it felt more like something that could have been sent out as a written update. Anyway, a bit of a dull start, but I bet you're asking, so what's actually coming? So, Custom Seas is going to be the main feature coming in Season 20. I know there's been a fair bit of confusion around that, and some people are still expecting something else to be tucked in alongside it, and honestly, that's partly on the developers. They didn't exactly nail the messaging and left things just vague enough for people to start connecting dots that weren't really there, but since the Community Direct, they've been pretty clear. Season 20's hallmark feature is Custom Seas, tied in with the monthly Last Ship Standing and Build Round Weekend. That's the package. Also, it's worth mentioning Custom Seas are not PvE servers. No reputation, gold, or commendations can be earned. They're a literal sandbox. It's also worth mentioning that they are going to be entirely free, which is great news. Now let me just say this up front. Speaking as a content creator, this is brilliant news. Genuinely. I get to the average player it might come across a bit thin, maybe even a bit empty on first glance, but from a content point of view, this opens a ridiculous number of doors. Storytelling, cinematics, proper set-piece moments, running your own events without the game getting in the way every 5 minutes. It's all there now. Custom Seas, as a content creator, isn't something you burn through in a weekend either. It's the kind of tool that keeps giving as long as people are willing to get creative with it. And they will. Not just me, but plenty of other creators are going to run with this and build some genuinely great stuff for the community. And that's not copium, it's just a reality of what happens when you hand people this kind of freedom. And to be fair, it's worth drawing a line under that, because this does have the potential to be something genuinely great, if it's used well. It's just not going to look that way to everyone straight out of the gate. The issue, as always, sits with the average player. They'll probably like the idea of Custom Seas, maybe jump in, mess around with it for a bit, but the novelty will wear off, and then it's straight back to adventure mode. And that's where the cracks might start to show, especially when you stack it up against recent seasons. The last one didn't really bring much to the table, the one before that didn't quite land the way it needed to, and the one before that was, well, smugglers, and that went down about as well as you'd expect. So yeah, Custom Servers has a lot going for it, but whether Season 20 actually feels like a strong season is probably going to come down to how much value you personally get out of it. If you're into creating, organizing, or just messing around with ideas, you'll probably love it. If not, you might be back in adventure mode wondering where the rest of the season went. Now, this next section is going to sound like I'm going back on what I said at the start of the video, but I'm really just putting this in a more digestible way, whilst also pulling in bits from other dev updates and forum posts to fill in the gaps. Anyone who watched the Community Direct will know exactly how much of this was glazed over. So, they also went over a range of system changes, and this is probably the most straightforward part of the update. The seasonal act model is being scaled back because it's been putting too much pressure on the development, which, in hindsight, explains why recent updates have felt a bit stretched, and that's putting it nicely. Whether that actually improves consistency is another question, but at least they've acknowledged the issue. They're also looking at further changes to player population and server density. It sounds promising, but it's one of those things that only really matters if you can actually feel the difference in-game. That said, the recent changes have been felt by myself and plenty of other players. The seas are once again alive, and compared to a couple of months ago, on an average play session of let's say 4 hours, I'm running into an average of 10 to 15 ships, so something's going right there. On the economy side, they've admitted Outpost versus Emporium is out of balance, which isn't exactly news to anyone playing. More details are coming, apparently, but what they did confirm is that gold isn't getting reset, so any hopes of a clean slate can be put to bed. The Emporium itself is being adjusted as well, with items rotating in and out over time. On paper, that either keeps things feeling fresh, or just quietly turns into a race against the clock before things vanish again. And I'll be honest, they're marketing this as making the Emporium easier to navigate by rotating stock, which is... Sure, let me just quickly Google a better way to do that. Oh wait, whilst I was searching, I accidentally stumbled onto something revolutionary. A search bar. Incredible technology. Truly ahead of my time. I'm now a game developer. But in all seriousness, guys, just say what it is. It's a premium shop, and rotating items is a pretty standard way to drive engagement and sales. That's fine. There is no need to dress it up like reinventing a navigation system. We're all adults here. Probably. So let's not overcomplicate it. The Season Pass is where things are a bit more interesting. It's getting a proper overhaul. A new UI, progression shifting to a tier-based system, but more importantly, it's not just passive cosmetic rewards anymore, they're adding playable rewards, which essentially means bespoke quests tied into the pass itself. So instead of just unlocking cosmetics that you'll hardly use and moving on, you'll actually have things to go out and do as part of the progression. On top of that, they're adding some real value into the tiers. At certain points, you'll be able to choose between Emporium items, one of 3 options, which, if handled well, is a pretty big shift from everything being locked behind a paywall. There's still a bit of mystery around how often that shows up, but even so, free Emporium items as part of progression is going to land well with most players. And then there's the big end of pass item. They're clearly leaning into making the final stretch feel worth it, with a more standout end of season reward to chase. This time it's a golden skeleton animated arm sword, which is definitely one of the more eye-catching rewards they've put in that slot. It's the kind of thing that actually gives you a reason to finish the pass, rather than just drifting off somewhere in the 70s and forgetting it exists. And finally, there's a shift in focus toward building a live calendar of events instead of relying on one big headline feature each season. That could mean a steadier flow of things to do, or it could just make everything feel more fragmented. This really depends on how they handle it. They also mentioned that custom seas will be changed consistently as we move forward in development, but trust levels are a little low on that statement, mainly because the same was said about Hourglass, and that ended up taking 10 seasons before we really saw meaningful change. Now, all of this does come from a good place, but the constant shifts in focus over the years of development don't exactly fill people with confidence. It does leave you wondering whether this is actually how things will move forward, or if we'll be back here again in 6 months talking about another change in direction. There's a real trust issue that needs fixing in the game's development, and hopefully, even if these new tool sets aren't perfect for everyone, the key thing is that they stick to their guns, make the content worthwhile, and actually follow through on what's being said, instead of doing another 180 6 months down the line. But anyway, Anyway, I am staying neutral on this one, because at the end of the day, it's very much a perspective thing. As a content creator, this is all good news. So I'll leave it with you. What do you guys make of all of this? I'll also be going a lot deeper into custom Cs in the next video to answer any questions, showing everything they've got to offer and how it actually all works in practice. So if you're curious or just want to see how much chaos you can realistically cause, don't miss that. So drop a comment about what you think about this, and while you're there, maybe give that like button a gentle tap or an aggressive shove, and consider subscribing if you want to see more. But until next time, guys, happy sailing.
We'll be back later this summer with another Community Direct, where we'll let you know all about everything headed to the game in the second half of this year. So until then, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the seas.